Welcome back, fellow football fanatics. We are here on with Adam, who is a University of Texas graduate. He also just recently started a YouTube channel called Bald Father Bets. I have the link to that in the description, so I encourage you to check it out. He's joining us to do a recap of USC and LSU. We'll talk about how legit we think both USC and LSU are. It was a very close game in Las Vegas. Most importantly, we're going to be going through Michigan and Texas and looking at all the different angles, both on the field, off the field, picks against the spread. And then we'll also be looking at a plethora of other Week 2 matchups and just briefly touching on them. And all the Week 2 matchups that we're briefly going to be touching on, I am going to be doing full-on preview and prediction videos as well for. So that'll give you a little bit of a hint of where things are going to be going for the rest of the week. How are you doing, Adam? Yeah, it was with Florida State now going, 0-2 in week 0 and week 1. That's probably, if I'm being honest, my worst pick for the 2024 season, and we're not even a 15th of the way through. Because I had them winning the ACC and actually going 13-0, and then nope, 0-2 already. They look terrible. And besides that, I think everything else outside of Vanderbilt beating Virginia Tech, who was another ACC team that I was high on, everything else went that way. Well, thank you. The audience briefly couldn't hear you, but I corrected it.
Okay, we're good.
Yep.
Good news. Okay. Yeah, the Florida State one, certainly a shocker. From a against the spread standpoint, Bald Father Bets, we were on Georgia Tech and we were on Boston College both, but the outright win 100% was shocking. And not just the outright win, the dominating fashion in which the outright wins took place. I mean, Florida State was never even really, they never had a chance, and especially against Boston College and against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech really took control of that in the second half.
Yeah, it was so interesting because I was sick yesterday, and I really didn't feel good, but I felt better as the night went on, and it was funny watching Boston College just they murdered Florida State. It looked like, I don't know how closely you followed the Big Ten West because it was pretty boring in its existence, but Wisconsin hosted Illinois in 2022, and they were big favorites, and Illinois just killed them and ran for 200 yards and held them to, I think, two yards with Braylon Allen even, and they just took the energy out of that atmosphere, and that felt exactly the same in Doak Campbell. So I wonder how that team is going to finish out the year. Are they going to totally quit and bottom out? Are they going to rebound? I don't exactly know. But then again, the ACC is clearly not my area of expertise.
The other question is, do they bench DJ? Does DJU, after signing a big NIL deal to come there, does he end up getting benched after 2 starts? That's a really interesting thing as we move into this new era of NIL and transfers. When you have a situation like that, how much leeway does the coach have to actually make the trigger and bench, knowing how much money was spent to bring a player in?
That's a very good point. It felt like they weren't willing to, even when it was obvious last night that he couldn't make throws to the boundary. Yep. He couldn't really even make throws in front of him in the middle of the field. But then again, his receivers did a very poor job too. It's just nothing seems to be going right for them offensively or defensively. It seems like it's just their punter and their kicker are the only good parts of the team, and that's about it.
Agreed. Yeah, they have nothing clicking. They have nothing working. They have no spirit, no fight. That all that aggression that you saw from the team last year just completely gone.
Oh, someone in the chat wants me to say go Vols, so I'll say go Volunteers. With you being a Texas graduate, I know you think Texas is the real UT.
The real UT.
Obviously, you have to say that. What do you think, briefly, before we get into the recaps and all this different stuff? What do you see the balance of power in the SEC being right now?
I think it starts with Georgia. It ends with Georgia. That's the first. That's the first and foremost. They have the number one coaching staff in college football. They have the number one program in college football. Their program travels. Their program recruits their home state. Their program recruits neighboring states. They've built class on top of class. They have the ability to practice in the way that you need to practice to win national championships. So they have what's called their Bloody Tuesdays. I don't know if people know about it, but it gets its nickname because they practice so hard that there's blood on the field.
I
And
never
you
knew
can,
that.
yeah, Bloody Tuesdays. It's a thing. You can look it up. And they have the ability to do that because they're 3D at every position. So they don't have that worry of, oh, well, we can't practice too hard because then we may lose guys and guys are going to go down and we can't replace them. They don't need to do that. They can practice with the physicality that they need to go win games. And their kryptonite, Nick Saban, is gone. So again, they haven't lost anyone, not Nick Saban in what feels like 100 games. I know it's not 100, but it's what it feels like. So I think it starts there. Once you get off of Georgia, I think you're in a really interesting era right now. You have Texas coming in after having one very good season. I think Sarkisian has a very good coaching staff assembled. I think they're a very good team. You have OU coming in, who historically is a better college football program than Texas. They've won 7 national championships to Texas's 3. They dominated the Big 12 during their time there. They're down a little bit because Lincoln Riley took everything when he left, and Brent Venables is only in year 3. But we'll see how that continues to progress. They seem to be turning the corner on defense, and then I don't think Alabama's going anywhere. I know some people do. I think Kalen DeBoer and the coaching staff this year, not Kalen DeBoer versus Nick Saban, but the overall coaching staff this year is miles ahead of where it was last year, and that's a testament to what Nick Saban did given the subpar coaching staff that he had around him in his final year.
I absolutely agree with that take about Alabama. I don't get why I feel like people wanted Alabama to go away and they didn't look at actual on the field, off the field changes, upgrades, and they didn't use sound judgment, especially given what Kalen DeBoer did at Fresno State, what he did at Washington. It seems, or seemed rather, because what they did to Western Kentucky, I know, was a Group of 5 school, but it was one of the more impressive beatdowns of a Group of 5 team that I've ever seen. It seemed like it was too good to be true for them to go away, but I think it's going to be evident in the next few weeks that nope,
And
they're not.
then the question too with him was, could he recruit? I think they have the number 2 recruiting class in the country behind Ohio State right now.
Yes,
They're dominating on the recruiting trail. Obviously, he can coach. Obviously, he can scheme. Him with Jalen Milroe is, I mean, what he did with Michael Penix and Jalen Milroe has more talent. It's going to be scary to see. But then when you get outside that Alabama side, then you have a bunch of teams that are right there. I mean, Ole Miss is right there. Tennessee is right there. They are primed. Their fan bases are hungry for a college football playoff appearance, and they're talented. They're really talented. I mean, Ole Miss has. I understand they bought their roster, but that is the day that we're in college football. But it's very talented, and same thing with Tennessee. Nico was extremely impressive it wasn't his first start because he started the bowl game, but his first regular season start, it was very impressive.
agreed. Yeah, it's certainly the most fascinating conference, I think, in terms of depth and overall quality of play. But LSU, who some people expected to be like I don't know how many, it didn't seem like a lot, but some expected them to be a potential national title contender this year. And they really, I don't exactly know what to call it because it was such a good game on Sunday, but they blew their opportunity to let themselves be known to the college football world on Sunday. It was a game where they were favored by 3.5 in the end. They, just looking at for how the teams performed last year, On defense, both were terrible. LSU was better on offense. LSU recruits better, and they're from the better conference in the SEC. And both coaches, I thought, had gaffes. I thought they also made good decisions. USC came out on top 27-20 in a game that I thought followed my assessment that USC, it wasn't necessarily that they were the better team, but they were a lot more comfortable totally relying on their passing offense and nothing else. Whereas LSU, they didn't have that same level of QB or wide receiver play. Both defenses also looked very improved as well.
It's amazing what a competent coaching staff will do for you just in one game to the next. I mean, LSU and USC had maybe the two worst defensive coaching staffs in the power conferences last year. I mean, Alex Grinch, I can't. If that guy ever gets another job, I have no idea. But I mean, De'Anthony Lynn is, again, a lot of people just didn't follow UCLA. A lot of people don't follow football out west, especially in the LA region. One of the best defensive coordinators in college football. Not the best, but one of. You can throw his name in the top 15, top 10. You could argue top 5, but I think let's let some things happen first and see how it goes.
Yes.
But that game was very interesting in the number one. So we were at Bald Feather Bets. We were on USC plus the 4.5, pretty big. We were on it for 4 units. So it was the tied with the most confident pick we had in the weekend. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that there was no reason for LSU to be favored by 4.5. The teams were very similar in the previous year. They had no defense. They had excellent offenses. LSU was replacing their offensive staff. They were replacing their offensive coordinator. I thought they were more reliant on Jaden Daniels the previous year than USC was on Caleb Williams.
Bingo.
And I think, yes, way more reliant on that. And I think that tons of people were sleeping on Miller Moss and the fact that a Lincoln Riley system, it makes good quarterbacks look great and it makes great quarterbacks Heisman winners. So that was the big difference. And you saw it late. Miller Moss made some excellent throws late that Garrett Nussmeier missed on.
Yes.
But the question mark for LSU is the biggest mismatch in that game was LSU's offensive line going up against USC's defense. And when they had the opportunity to lean on it, when they had the ball, they were up 17-13. They had the opportunity to lean on it. They didn't. And at one point, this was the key point in the game. They had the ball. They got up to a 3rd and 2. They hurried up to the line and they snapped it and they handed it off. USC broke right through the offensive line and stopped them, and they had to punt. And then USC got the ball back, drove down the field, scored a touchdown, and took the lead. And that was one of those things where if you're Brian Kelly and you're that offensive staff, you have to do some soul searching, I think, as to how you let that game get into the situation that it did. Because
Yes.
they could have coached it very differently, and they probably walk out with a 3-point win, a 4-point win, whatever the number is.
Yeah, especially since LSU, they got better pressure and they ran the ball better than USC. So when I watched that game, I saw that I thought LSU was better in the trenches, but both teams were more comfortable because of what they had done last year and the year prior to that. More comfortable, I think, relying on their quarterback and relying on their receivers and trying to rely on their new and improved defenses more so than their trenches. Another factor for USC, I think, was the fact that they did better in the portal at defensive back than LSU did. So their pass offense and pass defense were both better than LSU's. And the fact that both wanted to utilize their pass game more than their ground game, well, there you go. USC had the mismatch. Do you think that they're, like, are you like me where I'm cautious about USC? Because I had them winning this game in the preseason and then going 500 or worse in Big Ten play after, because I thought this would be a phenomenal matchup.
Right there with you. No. I apologize. Finish. I'm right there with you, though.
Okay. Yeah, I had them. I think it's foolish now with how Wisconsin and Minnesota look, but I had them actually getting a losing record despite winning this game because I thought it was a big opportunity for USC. All the matchups went in their favor, but then most Big Ten teams I thought would have better defenses than LSU and better combined trench play and a more willingness to run the ball. So I don't
I'm
know how good they're going to be.
I'm right there with you. So one of the things we are not big futures bettors at Baldfather because of what it does to your mindset. If you make a futures bet, you start to look at individual weeks through the lens of your futures bet because you want that bet to hit. So say you make a play on I don't know, Clemson to win the ACC, and then it's week 4, and you're looking at that game, and you're like, well, man, if my bet's going to hit, then I really, they need to win this game, so I'm going to bet on them to win this game. But I still like to look ahead throughout stuff, and I'm right there with you on USC. So I had them winning the game. I don't. We don't play money lines. We just play against the spread. So I always take the points if you can get the points. But I did have them winning that game. I think they're in for a difficult stretch. They have that 4-week stretch. I think it's Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Penn State. I think
Yes.
they play, back to back to back to back. That is extremely tough. Just the travel alone, because it's home, it's away, home, away, home. It's very, very difficult. Drew Aller is probably the only other quarterback, I think, in the Big Ten right now that when USC goes to play him, they may not have the better quarterback in terms of the matchup with Miller Moss. And then on top of that, Penn State's going to be more physical than them. I still think that we'll talk about Michigan, Texas here in a little bit, but I think Michigan is a team that they're a developmental program and they always get better as the year goes on. And by week 4, week 5, when they play, I can't remember the exact week, but when they play USC, I think they'll get to a point to where they'd be able to game control USC to death. I just don't see in situations against powerful Big Ten teams that run the ball, control the clock. I think USC is going to struggle. Now, is struggling mean that do I think they could win eight games? Do I think they could possibly even win 9 games? They have a brutal schedule. Outside of the Big Ten, they also play Notre Dame.
Ooh.
But and Notre Dame was another team that can game control them to death based on what we saw in Kyle Field on Saturday. It's an absolute brutal schedule. But could they win 8 games? Could they get to 7 games? Could they win 9 games maybe as a ceiling? Yeah, they could. But it's still the talk of, USC, now they can contend in the Big Ten. They can win it all. They can go to the playoff. Let's pump the brakes. Everybody needs to ease up on that.
Yeah, yeah. And we could be wrong here, but the fact that I picked USC, you picked USC to win this game, and we're both, even when picking that, thought it's still going to be hard. You study LSU, and their O-line it's great. It's probably might be the nation's best in pass block. It's not even close to the nation's best in run block. And that D-line was wrecked from poor coaching last year and all the departures they had. I mean, I'm thinking Michigan, I don't know about Wisconsin on D-line, but O-line, they should be solid. And then Minnesota and Penn State, especially Michigan and Penn State, will have way better trench play than the
Much better.
Trojans. And I think
Much better.
Lynn is a genius. I think he may even be a top 5 DC, certainly top 10. But Jim Knowles, I think, is a top 5 DC. And in his first year with Ohio State, where they had better talent, better depth, better recruiting, in those games where they were out physical, they bled out. And I think there's a good chance, not a guarantee, because there are no guarantees in football, that could happen against Michigan, Penn State, Notre Dame, and that 4-game stretch with Wisconsin at home and even Minnesota on the road with all that traveling, they could mess up in one of those games as well. We'll just have to see. And I see you, Justin Ziegler, with that $20 super chat and how you disagree with this take. We'll get to your super chat at the end here. All right, you think it's time to talk about the big game? It's by
Yeah, I
far the
think
biggest game of week two.
I think so. I think so. It's that standard tradition now of week two where they give you one really big one, but the slate isn't quite as good as what you got in week one. Same, last year you had Texas, Alabama, and then there's a few other ones, and then this year you get Texas, Michigan, and there's a few other ones, but nothing ever hits kind of like that week one bang that they give you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Notre Dame, A&M, then Miami, Florida. You had, gosh, I'm already forgetting some of
Clem,
the games just because there's so many of
Clemson,
them.
Georgia,
Oh
Clemson,
yeah,
Georgia,
that was one.
Penn State, West Virginia. Yeah,
Yeah,
you had some big ones.
they were forgettable just because of how dominant Georgia and Penn State were. They
Yeah.
wrecked those teams. Um, Compare and contrast from a preview standpoint last year's matchup with Alabama and this year's matchup with Michigan. What are the similarities? What are the differences in these big games for Texas and Sarkisian?
So I'll look at it from the spread point of view, betting point of view. So last year, Texas was a 7-point underdog to Alabama, and that was one of the easier plays of the year. Um, Texas, from a talent standpoint, was just below Alabama. They had the more experienced quarterback coming in. Sarkisian runs a system where he has a lot of squeeze splits. So it's when everyone is in tight and bunched together. And Alabama coaching tree teams, so Saban, Kirby Smart, Loxley at Maryland, they have issues dealing with that because they're going to play a lot of man on you, and then they're going to get pressure on your quarterback, and it makes everything quicker in reads for the quarterback. So that one was an easy kind of an easy read. I was at the game. Yes, Texas won by 10 points. A lot of people forget that going into the fourth quarter, Alabama was winning 16-13. So it was a very, very tight matchup heading into the fourth quarter, and then it kind of broke open. Texas scored a touchdown, got an interception, scored another touchdown, and then they actually ran out their last drive was over 7 minutes long, and then they were able to take peace. So they kind of controlled the ball. They were more physical at the line of scrimmage. They kind of bullied Alabama around during that game. So in terms of similarities to this year, I see very little. So coming into this one, they are 7.5-point favorites, and that line is very interesting because if you bet it previous to week one, it was at 3.5. It then got released right out of the gate at 5, and that's when the sports books will release the line, but only to a select few people, to professional bettors. They see what their take is. Then it got bet to 6. We took it at -6 at Baldfather for 1 unit. Nothing confident, but just to have a play on it. And we still may come in over the top on Michigan later, depending on where the line goes. But then it got to -7. And then it crossed over to -7.5. And anytime lines are hanging around the number 3 or hanging around the number 7 and they cross over, books don't do that lightly because that's the key number where you're going to start to get bets on the other side. So then when you look at the actual matchup, I do not see Texas. Texas has an outstanding offensive line. They have one of the best offensive lines in the country. I do not see them bullying Michigan off the ball. Mason Graham, Josiah Stewart. Josiah Stewart he scares. Any Texas fan who does not know Josiah Stewart's name will know him at the end of that game. Texas has a right tackle. It's the only person that they had to replace on the offensive line. A lot of people are comparing within the Texas program, very close, are comparing him to Mims at Georgia. He got 8 starts and then he got drafted in the first round in the NFL. A lot of people think that he can have that same trajectory where he's a one and done at Texas this year.
What's his
this
name?
Game, Cameron William. No, it'll come to me. Sorry.
Cameron Williams, yes.
Cameron Williams. Okay, I was right. Yeah. He has the ability to, if he really shows up against Josiah Stewart to kind of make that name for himself in the NFL draft. I'm one of the people who does not see a lot of Texas people think, oh, we're going to bully him, we're going to push him around, you know, we're going to show Graham, we're going to show Grant, we're going to show Stewart. I'm one of the people who does not see the game going that way. And I think that on the offensive line for Michigan, I know they're inexperienced, but that's a system. That's a developmental system. I trust Michigan with offensive line. I trust Texas with quarterbacks. I trust Lincoln Riley with quarterbacks. I trust Michigan with offensive line. And I think Michigan will be more physical on the offensive line. So in terms of similarities between the two, I think they're completely different games. And if the game is 16-13 heading into the fourth quarter with Michigan having the lead, I don't think Texas breaks this one open. And that maybe they could win. Maybe they can win 20-16. Maybe they could win 19-16. But you're not going to end with a 10-point victory for Texas if Michigan has a 16-13 lead heading into the fourth quarter. There's no chance.
Yeah, I did think it was interesting to your point when I saw the spread swing as much as it did. And I wonder if it's going to get close to, I wonder if it's going to get up there to 10 or so. And it's understandable why so many people are going on Texas, just from that basic intuitive reaction that Texas dominates Colorado State. They have the more experienced roster, the better quarterback, and Michigan looked awful against Fresno State offensively. Defensively, they looked very good, and the O-line came alive and looked like its old self in the fourth quarter. But I do agree that, because we talked a little bit about this pre-show, if it continues to go above that 7 number, I just see personally Michigan covering, especially if it's like Texas minus 10, more so 10.5 or
If
something.
if it gets to 10, so it's a very rare, but you could see maybe so the way, real quick, the way we bet at Bald Fathers, we do units. So, you know, a 1 unit play, and say your unit is $100. So we say, we take this, we bet 1 unit, we take this, we're betting 3 units on it. If that line hits Texas minus 10, there's a very good chance there'll be 10 or more units put on Michigan plus the 10. So it's kind of what I talked to you about this a little bit pre-show. It's very difficult to beat Michigan by more than 1 score because you only get about 60 snaps in a game when you play Michigan because they control the ball. The new clock rules in college football where you're not stopping on first downs. So you're only going to get so many possessions to beat them. And you're not going to score on every single one of those possessions because they have one of the best defenses in college football.
Yeah, they shorten games. They compress it. I mean, last year the offense for Michigan was way more effective than in 2022, and they scored about a touchdown fewer per game because they abused the new clock rule to just milk games and get out of there as quickly as they could. It was weird and almost made games that much more boring, even coming from a Michigan fan like myself. Do you think there's a chance?
They frustrate the opponent.
Yeah, they constrict them. Do you think there's a chance that Michigan is stonewalled by Texas up front and that Texas can get it out of hand?
There's 2 ways the game can go. If Texas scores 35 points, it turns into a high-scoring game. If one of these teams scores 35 points, Texas won, and there isn't a path to victory for Michigan. Do I think that it's possible that it happens? Do I think there's a chance that Sark's first 15, 20, 25 play script has Texas go up 14-0 early, and then there's really never a chance for Michigan to make the comeback? Yes, I think it's possible. I think it's more likely that the game is close and low scoring, and there's a path for either team to win that way. I don't think Texas runs away with it. I don't think they stonewall Michigan. I think there's a chance you could see, you know, it's supposed to be like a high of 61 degrees in Ann Arbor that day with a 24% chance of rain, 10 to 20 mile an hour winds. That favors Michigan huge.
Oh,
I think
wow.
there's a chance. I think that favors Michigan massively. I think that if you look at, say Texas comes out, they get the ball first, they march down, they score, they go up 7-0. Michigan comes out 3 and out. Texas gets the ball again. They're marching down the field. People have been talking about the loss of CJ Baxter. It's a big deal. It's overall to how many total rushing yards Texas is going to have on the total year. I don't think it's maybe plus or minus 100. I don't think it's that much. Where it's a big deal is in short yardage situations. Blue and Wisner are smaller runners. They're not second and goal from the 3-yard line type, hand the ball off. That comes in with Jarrett Gibson. Jarrett Gibson is the freshman running back. Freshman running backs and rookie running backs in the NFL fumble the ball. So say that it's 7-0. Texas is second and goal from the 4. They're getting ready to go up 14-0. Then this thing's over, game, done. They hand it off to Gibson. Grant or Graham comes in, gets the punch out. That ball's slippery. It's wet. Michigan picks it up. They march down 7-7. And all of a sudden, where the game could have been over right away, now all of a sudden you have a ball game that's playing right into Michigan's hands. And Sark is now through his first 15, 20, 25 play script. And now he just has to call plays based off the feel of the game. I see things more like that as likely happening against Michigan than I do the Texas winning 35-10, Texas winning 35-13, Texas winning 28-10. I just see it staying close like that. Ultimately, I do think there's a good chance that Texas can win by that 1 touchdown margin. Maybe get a score late and equal that to the 2-score margin, the 10-point. But I think it's more likely that if Texas wins, they win somewhere between 3 and 7. And I know I saw your video earlier. I know you're picking Michigan to win. I do think Texas comes out with the victory. I was all over Michigan preseason. And then when the coaching staff didn't have enough confidence in Alex Orji to start him, and they started Davis Warren, that flipped me. At the end of the day, I don't see Davis Warren beating Quinn Ewers in a game that gets close in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. And we actually talked about that when you commented on my live show. I moved from thinking that they needed to start Orji all the time to win to they need to mix him in and really play good special teams. And they played good special teams against Fresno. But I was all over Michigan preseason too, from a standpoint that they'd still be an elite team. I don't think that way anymore. I now believe that Texas neutral field would win I don't want to say 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, but 7, 8, maybe 6 at the worst. I'd probably lean 7 out of 10 against Michigan or a little more because they're more dynamic. They have the more diverse, balanced, deep roster. And Warren, while he does a good job, I think, at best of being a game manager, or he could do a good job, I didn't see that against Fresno State. And I think that they're going to have to mix in Orji a lot in order to effectively move the ball. And I think they'll do it well. But
I think they will too. I think they will mix them in.
Yeah. I'm not as confident on this pick, though, as I was about Michigan beating Ohio State last year. And that was when everyone in this game was picking Ohio State. And I thought, nope. Stats, information, everything screams Michigan last year, even with the suspension. That's not the case this year. I think Michigan has a trench advantage. I think they have a defense advantage. But when looking through all the matchups last night, Michigan has, I think, in terms of volume, more advantages. But the small volume of advantages that Texas has are that much bigger in terms of gaps. Texas's passing offense is way better than Michigan's passing offense. And that goes for both quarterback and your backup receivers could start for us easily. So what did you think of my prediction of 23-20, kind of a bunch of field goals, a turnover for each?
I think that's exactly where it could be. And if the game is like that, that's one of those ones where, like I said, there's a path to victory for either team. If this is a 17-14, 23-20, 21-17 type game, then I 100% see a path to victory for both teams, and Michigan could definitely walk out with a win. One of the other points you made about special teams, Texas has a true freshman punter, and he only punted one time against Colorado State, and in a rain on the road at the big house, over 100,000 fans there, wind 10 to 20 miles an hour, that could end up coming into play. Not worried about the kicking situation. Bert Auburn is
Elite.
he's elite. He's an NFL kicker. Not worried about that. I mean, a lot of Texas fans don't realize how many games he won them last year.
Oh yeah.
Because the team couldn't put the other team away in the fourth quarter. So those field goals that he made from 50, 55 yards in the second quarter ended up being, the difference in games. But that true freshman kicker, that's a big deal. I do have one sort of hot take on Michigan that I want to get your thoughts on. I am a believer that Khalil Mullings needs to assume the Blake Corum role, and Donovan Edwards needs to still be the same Donovan Edwards that he was last year. I don't like a Donovan Edwards that gets 25 touches a game. I think that in Michigan's physical offense, physical run game, Mullins needs to take that Corum role, and that's when Michigan becomes the best Michigan that they can be.
After watching the Fresno State game, I can't even call that a hot take. I can't, because when him and Orji were on the field at the same time, run 5 or 10 yards, same thing on repeat. I mean, Michigan looked like Michigan again, except this time it looked like they could effectively run a spread option without mistakes. That I absolutely agree with that. I think that Khalil Mullings, the reason I listed Edwards in my preview as a player to watch and not Mullings is I think that Mullings is going to move the ball regardless of what happens. I think where Edwards comes into play is if all we can do is 3, 4, 5 yards per pop, if that's all that Michigan can do, well, then Texas may be able to, because I think they have a good enough run defense still to bow up and force Michigan to kick field goals. If Edwards can get a good game, a big game, and just have those 1 or 2 or 3 big plays and one of them goes to the house in a game that should be low scoring because the over-under's 43.5, and I didn't know about the wind and the chance of rain and the weather, but I knew about the temperature, but the rain and the wind is more important. I see why it's projected to be a 27-20 or 24-17 Texas win, is because of all of those factors. But I don't think that's a hot take at all, Adam. I think that's a very smart read, not just based off of one game, but also based off of how Mullings played last year, where he's improved a lot year over year over year. I guess if there's one hot take I would have about Texas, but I don't know if it's a hot take per se. I do think that while Ewers is a great quarterback, a near elite quarterback, I have yet to see him be elite. Like even against many teams last season, and I think Alabama was his best game, though I could be mistaken. He has that habit of making like a mistake or two, like a critical one, not just a missed throw. No one's perfect, but like a critical mistake or two every game. How do you think that plays into this matchup, or do you think I'm mistaken here?
So he got that reputation after his first year, especially they had 2 games. They had TCU at home. They were favored by 7. And game day was in town. It's the famous where Pat McAfee goes, Texas, 15 or plus points, book it, done. And then the crowd like goes wild and everything. And I mean, Ewers played so bad. He played so bad, missing wide open guys, turning the ball over, all that stuff. Last year, Alabama was an elite game. Alabama, he played elite. He didn't really make any mistakes in that game. Then you get to the Oklahoma game, and he played very well in the second half, and he set them up to win the game. The first half was like it was back to the old Quinn Ewers. Now, the game against Washington, they didn't lose that game because of Quinn Ewers. He actually played very well. They lost that game because they fumbled the ball twice. And they were averaging almost, it was the same game, it was almost the same game plan that Michigan had. They were averaging close to like 10 yards a carry when they were handing the ball off because everyone could run on Washington last year. It's mind blowing that Oregon was not able to because everyone was able to run on Washington last year.
Yeah, that makes me
And
think the Idaho game may not have been a fluke, but we can get into
I,
that later.
we'll get to that one. I I don't think that Quinn Ewers has established himself as a surefire round one, pick one draft pick. I don't think he's established himself even as good as Carson Beck. You could argue between him and Shedeur Sanders. They both do different things. I think he has to have a year this year where he plays very mistake free football, where he plays at that elite level, where he plays like he did against Alabama, game over game over game, and he shows up in all the big games. Um, I don't think it's a hot take from you because you have half the fan base in Texas who's calling for Arch Manning to start, which they need to they need to settle down. They don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, but um, it's not a hot take. Now, if he goes in and he wins this and he gets his second major road victory, if he's able to get to an SEC championship game in their first year in the SEC, if he's able to win the SEC, which I think it's going to be pretty hard for anyone to go into Atlanta and beat Georgia, but let's say he's able to. If he's able to take him on a deep run in the college football playoff, those are the things that he can do to elevate himself into that elite status. But I agree with you. He is a great quarterback. He has not reached elite level. The question that I would have is, if we're saying Carson Beck is the best quarterback in college football, I don't think I would give him elite status either, though. I don't think there's a quarterback in college football this year who you could say has done enough to get themselves considered elite. And if I were to consider one, most people would say Beck. I could argue that Milroe out of the SEC is actually the one that you would give that to, given that he's the more dynamic playmaker between the two, and that there are other quarterbacks you could put in at Georgia, and that system would run just the same way. If you take Milroe out of Alabama, I'm not certain that that system's going to run the same way, immediately.
Yeah, yeah. I think if there's any quarterback who can become like generational this year, it would. I think it would be Milroe.
Yeah.
And then Gabriel is. I think he's really good, but again, not elite. There's clearly a ceiling to him, and with Beck, at this point, with how they developed Stetson Bennett and how Beck has looked good, I'm not going to question them, but your point is totally fair because it seems like now they're at a point where they can plug and play with the system that they have, especially with their strong offensive line. Jackson Dart is another player who could
Yeah.
be up there
He
very
could.
well
Yeah.
in that elite
He could hit
status.
it.
So your score pick is what, 23-20 Texas, 27-20 Texas?
So I have one unit on Texas minus the 6. So my score pick is 24-17 Texas. That's
Okay.
been my thought for this one. I see it being a 17-17 game in the fourth quarter, and I see Texas getting one touchdown drive.
Yeah. Okay. That I think that's a pretty it's a pretty good pick, especially given the fact that if Texas is able to score, if it's 17-17, that means Texas, when they get into the red zone, is able to punch it into the end zone more than not. And I think a game where I think red zone efficiency, Michigan wants to be in a field goal on field goal game where Texas just cannot get the ball into the end zone. Not because Texas doesn't have a good kicker, but because Michigan, I think, with Zvada has shown, both at his time at Arkansas State and also last week, that they can trade punch per punch, and then they can control the clock with, I assume if neither team's really good in the red zone, that Texas is struggling not just to run, but also to consistently open up the passing game. And I just think an ugly game benefits Michigan. A cleaner game benefits Texas, especially with their higher ceiling. I want to go into ranking all these different position groups before we close out. And I want to start with Um, head coach, but there's two parts to this because obviously I think Sarkisian's the more veteran head coach, and therefore from that standpoint you certainly have to say that he's better. Um, so head coach obviously goes to Sark.
I give that
Um,
to Sark. Yeah.
yeah. What about when it comes to, I know that Moore hasn't been around as much as Sark, but what about like scheming? Because Moore's done a pretty good job in very limited action, albeit in scheming. Do you think there's like any possibility that Moore can be at Sarkisian's level, trading scheme for scheme, punch for punch?
I wouldn't give it. I mean, Sarkisian won a wide receiver Heisman, right? And don't get me wrong, Devontae Smith is great. Devontae Smith won that Heisman because of Sarkisian's system, and Sarkisian's system had him open a lot. He has great hands. He has very long arms. He's fast. He's all those things. He's a great player for the Philadelphia Eagles. Sarkisian system, when you have the talent like a 2020 Alabama, like last year's Texas offense with Xavier Worthy, Jatavian, A.D. Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, Jonathan Brooks, and that offensive line, it's an elite system. So I give scheming, I give play calling, I would give that to Sarkisian. Um, what I'm giving to Moore is development, especially development on the offensive line. Michigan, in my opinion, is the number one developmental program in the country. Now, you can make a point that they don't deserve that title right now because the coaching staff, which did that development over the past 3 years, is gone. Um, the defensive coordinator is gone. The strength and conditioning coach is gone. The head coach is gone. You can make that point that they're no longer deserve that title and someone else deserves it. But I think Michigan, I think Oklahoma State is another one that continues to win more games with less. And that's where I'm looking at overall team talent composite, where people have filtered in at the recruiting rankings and then what they've done with that. No one can argue that with what Michigan did in terms of winning a national championship with a blue chip ratio of 53%. That's the lowest blue chip ratio to win a national championship in the CFP era. So the overall development and the development of the offensive line, I give that to Moore. Right now, I would still give recruiting, scheming, and just overall head coach to Sark.
I think those are very good points. And with Michigan, I would say there are questions there, but I do think they're still going to develop fairly well.
I do
How
too.
about the offensive and defensive staff? For offensive staff, I'd go with Texas. Defensive,
Yeah.
I'd I think they have some unproven assistants, but I'd slight Michigan there.
Yeah, I would. So I'm not the biggest Wink Martindale fan. I will admit that now. But I think that Texas went out and essentially got a co-defensive coordinator in Johnny Hansen this past year because there were questions about the pass defense. There were questions about PK now being in his third year. Okay, well, you should have seen some more improvement after that. So we need to bring in reinforcements on the defensive side. I think Michigan, especially when you look at the whole coaching staff from the defensive side, I would take Michigan, even though I get a little bit nervous about Wink Martindale's play calling, the blitz happiness. I think any Michigan fan, whenever anyone's too blitz happy, they're going to get a
Don
little
Brown.
nervous. Yeah, given the Don Brown years. But it's anyone, and this is going out to any Michigan fan. Wink Martindale is not Don Brown. I promise. I promise everyone, Wink Martindale is not Don Brown. His blitzes they're much more sophisticated. If you look at what he did at Baltimore, where essentially he has Marlon Humphreys locked down one side of the field and then he plays a zone on the other side of the field, he can do that with Will Johnson at Michigan. Johnson's going to get beat a bit more times because he's aggressive. Marlon Humphreys was aggressive too, and he would get beat sometimes too. But overall, then he makes a big play to make up for it. And that's where you saw the 86-yard, 84-yard
Yes.
interception, against Fresno State. He got beat. I mean, I think he gave up almost 60 yards receiving, but he also won the game with an 86-yard interception return for a touchdown. And that was him. Okay, he bit a few times, you got him a few times, but then he read the play perfectly, game over. And it was such a fitting way to end it. So I think that the players that Michigan has this year and the fact that they're elite on one end of the field and so they can lock that down with one corner. And then on the other end of the field, they're missing some pieces, and so they need to kind of make up for it. Then a zone scheme kind of fits them over there. And I mean, you or I could coach the defensive line, and they would be elite. So I'm not really worried. I'm not really worried about the defensive line at Michigan. So I would give the overall, just based off of pedigree, based off of reputation, based off of what they've done, the nod goes to Michigan on that coaching staff on the defensive side.
Yeah. And then obviously, as we've already said, it attacks Texas offensively.
Offensively, yeah.
Yeah, easily. For position by position, quarterbacks Texas, receivers Texas, D lines Michigan, secondaries Michigan. Any who do you think is the better O line? I now have to lean Texas a bit, but I think it could be a push. I don't quite know.
I think you give it to Texas right now. Like I said, I think Michigan's a program that's going to continue to get better as the year goes on. Sometimes you say, oh, you want to get teams early. You want to get teams early. I think this is a year that you want to get Michigan early because they're still figuring things out with, a new coaching staff, new players. I think by the end of the year, Michigan's offensive line could be, I think they could definitely be better at run blocking. Whether or not they'll be better at pass blocking than Texas, they probably won't get as many opportunities to pass block as Texas does, because Texas is going to be a throw to run type team and Michigan's going to be a run to throw type team. But I think by the end of the year, you could make the argument that, oh no, Michigan has the better rushing offensive line.
That makes sense. And then running back, tight end, linebacker, I'd go with Michigan. Any disagreements there?
I think running back and tight end's clear. There's no argument. I think the linebacker's the one where I would go with Michigan now. And I think possibly by the end of the year, you may be leaning Texas. And that's with, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to watch the Colorado State game film yet, but the speed that David Benda coming into the backfield and stopping the running back, I think it was on third down. The speed that Texas has at linebacker is elite. I think Texas is the fastest team in the country, both sides of the ball. The speed it kind of wows you like off the screen right away. And so in the right scheme, I think by the end of the year, you could be leaning Texas on linebacker, but right now I'd give it to Michigan.
Yeah, I know it was against Colorado State, and I saw more of the offense than the defense in what I watched, but the way that you all set up screens, the offensive line plays it perfectly. They're disciplined, and the receivers, like you said, they're fast. I mean, it's so fast. It's 10 yards and first down, easy.
Yeah.
And that's something that I actually do have a little bit of concerns about with Wink Martindale, even though, again, I do think he's better than Don Brown. I agree with you there, is if he zero blitzes, that very likely is going to end up in some type of big play, because Texas with the speed that if Michigan had the secondary they did last year, I may actually like it, but with the depth and inexperience we have right now, and with Texas's experience on the O-line, quarterback, and receiver, that would end in disaster. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, say Will Johnson locks down Isaiah Bond. Great. Okay. And then you zero blitz. You still have Matthew Golden. Still have Silas Bolton. Still have Jonte Cook. Ryan Wingo's the freshman that doesn't look like a freshman, right? In the game film, he's number 5. It's going to be difficult. If Wink Martindale tries to zero blitz excessively, Texas will hit a few big plays. And then that's where, okay, all of a sudden, hey, we had this game controllable, but we gave up 2 60-plus yard touchdowns on bombs, and we can't make up for it.
Exactly. Well, thank you for talking about Texas and Michigan with us. That's very good. I thought that you did a phenomenal job breaking things down from a Michigan angle, and from a Texas angle, you certainly taught me a lot. Let's move on to some Week 2 games. I want to start out with Boise State traveling on the road against Oregon. Oregon's a 19.5-point favorite. They're favored to win this game about 4 out of 5 times if they played in a 5-game series per FPI. Oregon played Idaho close by the scoreboard 24-14, but statistically they blew Idaho
Blew
out.
them out, yeah.
But then there's the counterpoint of when you fail on 2 4th and inches by running the ball and your O line gave up pressures and they did I mean, Michigan's O line didn't look good for 3 quarters, but eventually they figured things out and it's like, okay, maybe they were vanilla blocking and with the inexperience, that's just how it went. Oregon's O line, from what I watched, looked like, and I know they were missing players, but it looked even worse for all 4 quarters. What are your takeaways from Oregon's performance against Idaho? Do you think it's flukish? Do you think it exposed major issues? And what do you see with this matchup against Boise State, one of the best group of 5 teams?
Yep. So I'm going to go negative and positive. Negative is my outlook for Oregon is I was amazed they couldn't run the ball against Washington last year. And if they still have that same problem, they're in for a very difficult stretch in the Big Ten, and they are nowhere close to having a chance to win the Big Ten, as a lot of people said. The other part of the negative on this is Bo Nix was the 12th overall draft pick in the NFL draft. And I think a lot of people were just like, oh, Bo Nix, Dylan Gabriel, switch him out, okay, good to go. Dylan Gabriel was let go of by OU. OU, if people think that, oh, no, Oregon came in with an NIL deal and they stole Dylan Gabriel away. No, they did not. OU and Brent Venables made a decision to move on to Jackson Arnold, and then that is why Dylan Gabriel was on the market for Oregon to be able to get. So you do not have the same level of quarterback play. Dylan Gabriel will not be a first-round NFL draft pick. Even if he won the Heisman, he would not be a first-round NFL draft pick. He's not going to win the Heisman, but even if he did. He doesn't have the size. He doesn't have the arm strength. There's a reason he's been in college for so long without going to the NFL draft. That's the negative side for it for Oregon. The positive side is what you said. Statistically, they blew Idaho out of the water. They had like 500 yards on the ground. They had like 30 first down to Idaho's 10 first downs. So I think people are making a little bit, out to too much out of this. As it pertains to this game, it's interesting that a lot of people had Boise State as their 12 seed in the playoff because I'm kind of sitting there thinking to myself, so did you think they were going to beat Oregon? Because it does an 11-1 Boise State get in over a 12-0 Liberty or a 12-0 Memphis or an 11-1 Memphis? Yeah. I don't think so. Not playing out in the Mountain West. So I think a lot of people who had that are almost assuming that they were going to beat Oregon. The line from a betting standpoint, if going into the weekend, Oregon was a 24.5-point favorite. And then that line, it came all the way down to 18, back up to 18.5, 19.5, and now it's kind of settled in that 19 to 19.5 range. Most likely, I'm not going to give out the pick here. I'll do that on Saturday on Bald Father Bets, but most likely we will be on Oregon because you're in a very good buy low situation with them from a lot of people who didn't watch the game because it took place so late. They saw the final score and then they say, oh, they're playing Boise State. Boise State, they ran for over 370 yards. It was against Georgia Southern, and they also gave up 45 points against Georgia Southern.
Yeah.
If they gave up 45 points against Georgia Southern, imagine what an angry Dan Lanning coached Oregon team is going to do to them.
Yeah, I agree with that, Reed. And from what I could understand, let me just quickly check the box score here. From what I understand, Idaho's offense didn't really get moving until that second half, and they only ran for 2.5 yards per carry. It was more so some trick plays by Idaho and Oregon being apathetic that even made it a game. It was more of Oregon's issues than Idaho's strengths, and I think that means you assume that Oregon would play way better than they did in week one, that, this game is in Oregon's ballpark. And Boise State didn't have good QB play. Like, they won because their running back had 6 touchdowns.
And that's another one where they brought in Malachi Nelson as the transfer out of USC, and he didn't win the job. It's the similar take that I had to Michigan with the whole offseason. They set that thing up for Orji to win the job, and Orji didn't win the job. The whole offseason they set that thing up for Malachi Nelson to win the job, and Malachi Nelson didn't win the job. That's concerning for Boise State at the QB level. And the other thing we talked about, same thing, Michigan, Texas probably held stuff back in their playbook. I bet you Oregon held back some stuff in the playbook too, because they were playing Idaho and they had a legit opponent in Boise State the next week.
Oh, that's a fair point, especially with all the hype that Boise State got and how good that offense looked at times last season, especially on the ground game. Yeah, I'd agree. I don't know about. I'm going to release a preview and prediction for this one. I don't know exactly when, but definitely before Saturday. I'd be tempted to take Oregon here to cover more than Boise State, because if Boise State does cover for 2 week, like if Oregon fails to blow out an opponent that they're way better than talent wise for 2 weeks in a row, then my belief, a still legitimate belief, that they're a top 10 team would just completely fall apart. Completely. Because it's like with Florida State. Maybe Georgia Tech is a fluke, but then when Boston College runs for nearly 300 yards, it's no, it's not a fluke at all. Like, Florida State's just that awful. Yep. This one is, to me, it's not tricky, but if I think about it too much, it is. Arkansas, traveling on the road, I think the term is when you're an underdog, getting 7.5 on the road and then laying 7.5 when you're favored. Yeah, Arkansas is only about touchdown and half a point dog to 16th ranked Oklahoma State with the Doak Walker Award winner. And while Oklahoma State played South Dakota State closer than the score indicated, they still covered the spread. And I thought there was a good chance that game wasn't going to be an upset. And I thought that Oklahoma State was always a step ahead of a very good South Dakota State team. What's your read on this game?
Yeah, so Oklahoma State was a step ahead. I watched that whole game, had it on the ESPN Plus on the phone while I had other games up. Oklahoma State was definitely a step ahead the whole time, and they barely even ran the ball, which is their strength with Ollie Gordon and the most veteran offensive line in college football. And diehards know this, but Oklahoma State has a top 5 offensive line this year in college football.
Yes.
And the Arkansas game, Arkansas Pine Bluff had about a 255-pound left tackle. So I'm not making too much out of the Arkansas dominant defense. What I am making out of is Bobby Petrino, Taylon Green combination. Bobby Petrino does well when he has a quarterback with the skill set of Taylon Green. I would still, right now, again, this one is the one that I really don't know how I'm going to go on Saturday. We will have a play on it, probably only a unit, nothing too crazy. I would lean that Oklahoma State would cover that, and that you're in a bit of a riding high phase with Arkansas because they won 70-0 and everyone fell in love with the offense. But that one, we're going to have to get more analysis on. I want to see how that line moves. So the line came out and it was actually 8.5, and Sharps bet it down to 7.5, meaning that you had a lot of money come in on people who were confident in Arkansas. Mike Gundy, since 2005, is the second most winning coach against the spread in college football. Number 3 is James Franklin, and number 1 doesn't coach anymore. It's Jim Tressel. Sorry, Michigan fans, but it's Jim Tressel. So Mike Gundy and James Franklin are the current college football ATMs in terms that they cover the spread, they print you money, and whenever you're going to go against them, you need to kind of have an idea of why you are. So if we decide at Baldfather to be on Arkansas, then there's going to have to be a very good reason as to why.
Yeah. I think that would be my concern too, is Oklahoma State had a very suspect defense. So if Arkansas has a legitimate offense, this will definitely be a close game. Actually, that makes sense given the short number and then the over-under being over 60, especially in today's college football post-clock change. They're basically assuming this will be a game in the 30s or upper 20s for both teams. I really don't know here, honestly. I mean, I would think that Oklahoma State would win because I just think they're better, and Arkansas was horrid last year, and I know they got in good pieces, but if Arkansas were to win this game, I don't know how I would view it other than, well, Oklahoma State lost because they'll do that sometimes to inferior teams, and I don't know if Arkansas would even do anything in the SEC. Although Texas A&M looked worse than I expected, so maybe
Yeah,
they could put together a few wins.
they could.
All
And
right.
and for Texas fans, real quick, anyone chalking up that trip to Fayetteville as a W, just remind yourselves of when we went to Fayetteville in 2021. So, yeah, Arkansas hates Texas. That stadium will be rocking for that. And I don't care if they're, 2-win team, that's going to be a dogfight for Texas.
Interesting. Well, I'll make sure to put that on my radar. Iowa State traveling on the road to Iowa. This is a rivalry in which Iowa has owned. Iowa
Owned.
State did win. Yes, exactly. Iowa,
Owned.
yeah, owned with all caps. Yeah, Iowa State won in 2022, and that was, I think, the only time, perhaps in college football recorded history, where a team who had two of their punts blocked ended up winning. That just goes to show how bad Iowa's offense is. This season, they had a kind of a microcosm of that Arkansas versus Arkansas Pine Bluff game where they actually scored quite a bit against an FCS team, particularly in the second half where McNamara looked really good, like better
He looked
days
very
of
good.
2021
Yeah.
Michigan good.
Yes. He looked very good.
Yeah. What's your take on this game? FPI says that Iowa has like a 7 out of 10 chance to win, but the spread in predictable Iowa fashion is only 2.5 in favor of the Hawkeyes, which basically
Yeah.
says neutral field. Perhaps Iowa State would be favored by a point, or it would be even.
I love Iowa games. 35.5 point over under with a 2.5 point spread. It's just Iowa games are just so much fun. So looking back at this game, the past 5 years, last year the spread was 3.5. The year before that was 3. That's when Iowa State won. They were favored by 3, so they pushed. The year before that, the spread was 4.5 or 4. Excuse me. The year before that, the spread was 1.5. It was Iowa minus 1.5, and they won by 1. So Iowa State covered the spread, but it was 18-17. And then the year before that, it was 3. So this game is always a 1, 2, 3. The highest spread I had out of there was 4, and that was 4 years ago, or 3 years ago. So it's always very, very close. I know you were really big. You're high on Iowa this year. I think you have them 11-1, and you have them going to the college football playoff.
I now have Texas.
Had.
This is a little bit of a.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but I had Texas. I now have Texas obviously beating A&M, and I think a 10-2 Texas gets in over an 11-1 Iowa. So now they'd be a snub.
Okay, a snub. Yeah, the Florida State of last year. But I mean, 11-1 for Iowa is still that'd be a great year. I am probably going to. I tend to take the points in this game. I think there's a chance that this line will flirt with 3 again. It was at 3 at one point, and it's going to be difficult for me to pass up on Iowa State, who has some very good returning production this year. Some important returning production too, not just like how much the percentage number, but then actually what it is that they're returning. Matt Campbell, I mean, he's gotta get a few wins over Ferentz at some point, right? So this is just one of those games where if Iowa was the dog by 3 points, I would take Iowa. Probably Iowa State being a dog by 3 points, there's a very good chance that we will be on Iowa State. That's still not an official pick. I don't know a unit amount that we'll have on that one. But if I had to guess where we'll be at on Saturday, it would probably be the Iowa State, especially if that number goes to 3, just because I like taking the points in this matchup because it's such a toss-up, like in terms of how that stuff is going to play out. Yes, Iowa wins, but again, Iowa also wins 17-18, games like that. So the +3 is really valuable in this matchup.
Yeah, and like if it went to plus like 3.5, I wouldn't say anything at all against taking Iowa State because like Iowa wins classic field goal fashion. Well, Iowa State still covers by a half point. Yeah, it's it's interesting for sure when you look at all of this different stuff. I personally look at this game and I think that Iowa's improved on offense. I think they have the number 1 defense in the country. I am not as good of a bettor as you are because I actually still haven't placed a bet yet, though my potential power ratings from last year and my picks in general seem to do well in general against the spread. So maybe I should start. I would look at Iowa here just because it's not yet at 3. And I do think that win by a field goal, I think there's a chance that if they have a good offense, like imagine Iowa with a good offense. And I don't think they have a good
Yeah.
offense, but like just top 100, top 75.
Exactly. Imagine with a serviceable offense that
Yes.
not even good. Yeah.
Yes, imagine an offense that's like Rutgers from last year, like not even top 50
Exactly.
or top 75, but they'd game control like everyone on their schedule but Ohio State. And I
Yeah.
think there's a chance they have that type of offense. We'll have to see, and it's a rivalry game, but I look here, Iowa at home, they look to have the better team, but we'll have to see because while Iowa owns the rivalry, you never know.
You
You
never
truly
know.
never know.
You never know. That's the thing. So I mean, yeah, no matter what it is, it'll be a small play. One thing, if any of the viewers do want to get in on Iowa, I would do it now while the line is at the 2.5, because a line going from 2.5 to 2, okay, whatever. That's not that big, all right, you lose the half point. A line going from 2.5 to 3, if you tried to, and you were on the side that's the favorite, that's a big deal. You just lost out on probably one of the most valuable half points that you could have. So take if you are going to place on Iowa, do it now, just in case that line does go back to 3.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I'd agree with you too. At 3, I wouldn't even touch it
Yeah.
because you'd win by a field goal. Well, it's a push. Nothing matters. And last but not least, although I may have told you about another game, did I tell you about another game outside of Kansas and Illinois?
We have Colorado, Nebraska,
Yes,
but yeah,
yes, yes. My bad.
yeah.
How could I forget about that? That's heretical. This is like
Come on, yeah, Deion Sanders, Coach Prime. What are you doing? Is this one of those shows that hates on Coach Prime that he always talks about all the time in his press
oh
conferences?
oh no. I don't really care about him too much. It's more so like his kids that I can't
Yeah,
stand. But
Shador and Shiloh. I
yes.
I don't have an issue with Shador as much. Shiloh bothers me.
Yeah,
Shiloh does bother me. Yeah, but yeah.
exactly. Yeah, let's
So
talk
which one?
Illinois, Kansas first,
Okay.
because Colorado, Nebraska is the 7:30. Kansas, Illinois is actually at 7, so you get that nice window leading
Yeah,
up to that big game. Kansas is a 5-point road favorite. Both scored over 40 points. Actually, both had an exact margin of victory of 45 against their FCS opponents. Illinois, you got to think their revenge is on their mind, but Kansas was the far better team last year. Both return, I think, similar numbers of production, and I do think Kansas is the better head coach. But again, it's a road game. Illinois should be better than last year. What's your read on this? I saw the line opened at 6.5 Kansas, and it's gone
yeah,
down.
yeah. Came down 6.5. Then when it got released to the public after the sharps betted, it was at 5.5, and now after public betting, it's down to 5. So I I hate, if we play it, we would probably be on Illinois. I I'm a bit of a Kansas hater this year, so that's just a fair warning. I think Andy Kotelnicki was so important to everything that Kansas was doing there. I also think that Daniels, this he's not hurt yet, but I think Daniels is going to get hurt because he always gets hurt. What is it this game? Maybe Illinois is a Big Ten team. They have a very stout defensive line. That's kind of the Bielema special since he's been at Illinois. They hit hard. They hit really hard. Not Devin Witherspoon hard when he was there, but they do hit hard. So if Daniels goes down, Bean isn't there to back him up, and that's kind of been the thing that Kansas has had all this whole time. So I'm just kind of waiting for Daniels to go down, and then also I just think Illinois can. I mean, they should have physically dominated them when they played them before, but I think they can really do it like this year. I think they can. I think they can kind of crush them. And I think Bielema has the ability to game control. Uh, I think they're better at the quarterback position. I think they're more physical. I think they can slow the game down. And I will trust Kansas without Andy Kotelnicki once they prove it a few times. So again, no official pick, but most likely we would be on Illinois if we take it. I have a little bit of an issue with taking it, knowing that it came out at 6.5 and now it's all the way down to 5.
Understandable. Quick question, because I'm not an expert on betting like you are, but isn't 5.5 like a special number? I only asked that because it earlier today was at 5.5, and then I saw it move down.
So your two most special numbers are 3 and 7 because that's the number games over 24% of football games end with a score of 3 or less. My favorite number is 4 because when you include a 4 over 1/3 of games, this is NFL, and at a 4 or less. With the college clock rules change since 2023, the score patterns are starting to go more towards the NFL when power conference opponents play each other that are in the same league. I mean, it's when Oregon plays an FCS opponent, even though they only won by 10, that you kind of start to spell that out. 5 is a special number, especially if you have teams that go for 2. That's when 5s start to play in because if a team gets the 2 or a team doesn't get the 2, then 5s start to really play into that. But
Okay.
it's not like a 5 is as big of a deal as a 7 or as a 3 or, in my opinion, as a 4. 4 is my favorite. Getting a team plus 4. That's why USC plus 4.5. That was my favorite play this past weekend. I love that number because you get the field goal touchdown, team loses by 4. Okay, we either pushed or covered if we had 4 or 4.5. When you only have a team plus 3, if they lose 17-13, or they lose 20-16, they lose 21-17, well, you lost. So that 4 is my favorite one.
Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm the opposite of you when it comes to Kansas. I think Kotelnicki's very important. I just think with what they've returned at quarterback, O line, receiver, if Daniels is able to stay healthy for most of the year, which is an if, but they should still be good. My question with them is kind of the year after when a lot of their senior linemen and receivers and their running back Devin Neal are gone. But I do think it's weird that knowing Kansas and how they pounded Illinois last year, and it's not like they looked worse than Illinois. In week 1, they're only favored by 5, and it looks like someone or many people are liking Illinois. I'll have to look at that game a little bit more. I would have leaned Kansas, but my interest is peaked now. I'm gonna have to look more at that game, and then you all will see in my preview and prediction what I decide. And then finally, we got the Buffaloes and the Cornhuskers, an old Big 12, Big 8, Big 10. It was never Big 10, but Big 8, Big 12 rivalry. Nebraska is, they're laying 7.5. And while part of me wants to say,
Up
and
from
I'll
six and a
probably
half.
go with this, smash, 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 because I think Nebraska's way better. I could also see Colorado making it close because they've played in a lot of close games. What do you
Yeah.
think about this?
So line came in at 6.5. Immediately bet over that all important number of 7, and then to 7.5, meaning that the sharps, the professional bettors, they are all over Nebraska. Um, I don't have a play yet. The public is in love with Deion Sanders in Colorado, meaning that you pay a premium to bet on them because the sports books are factoring into all the money that they're going to get on Colorado as the week goes on. So if the line, maybe the line should be 9, but it's only at 7.5 because they know they're going to get so much public Colorado money from all the people who are in love with Dion, the media love affair with Dion, all that stuff. The media love affair with Shador, Travis Hunter's phenomenal. I mean, he's
Yeah.
unreal, and I think Shador is very good too. I don't want to. Shador is a first round NFL draft pick. He had offers to Alabama, Texas. Sorry, we're back. He had offers to Alabama, Texas, everywhere else. He's a very, very good quarterback. But um, I I would lean Nebraska at this point. But again, I don't have an official pick. And that one, again, if we do have a play on that, we will have a play on that one at Baldfather just because it's fun. That's the other thing about Baldfather bets. I'm not going to sit here and give you, some FCS school versus some FCS school telling you that, oh, you can get great value on this number. I'm going to give you the games and the ones that you actually want to watch, because betting is supposed to be fun. Responsible gambling, that's a really, really important thing. You should not be betting with money that you can't afford to lose. If your finances at the end of the month are determined on whether or not you win or lose the bet, just stop betting, go home, sit down. But we're going to give you plays that you really actually want to watch the game. And when there's a big game like that, Colorado, Nebraska, we'll always give you at least a 1-unit play on that, so you can have something fun to do while you're watching the game. So I will make a play. Right now I lean Nebraska. It could change based on how that line moves over the week, but I, like you, just think that Nebraska's angry about how the game went last year. Matt Rule in second year, you can kind of look up the trend as to how he does in his second year and then his third year, and then that smash mouth football that they're going to want to play, and the fact that I think Raiola has a chance to be an elite quarterback.
Yeah, I'd lean Nebraska too, as I've already said. I already said in a tweet, I think this is even before Nebraska played. Colorado, North Dakota State, my apologies. I tweeted something along the lines of like, Nebraska's going to get 400 yards and they're going to game control this team to death. And after what they did to UTEP, which is what I predicted they would do, I had 38-0. Nebraska won 40-7. I think that it's likely that'll happen, but it's a big game. I want to do a deep dive, and there is a chance that Colorado, with their QB and receivers, if their O-line is just better than it was last year, can cause some problems for Nebraska's secondary.
I agree.
All right. Well, I think we had a great episode here. Great amount of time spent. Thank you very much for coming on. I appreciated it, and I want to have you on fairly soon. I think this is a good duo that we have here.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, Sam. Yeah, I definitely want to be back. So just for your audience, a little bit about me and Bald Father Bets. I started doing this in 2021, picking against the spread for NFL and for college football picks. Realized that we were pretty good at it as we developed our system. 2022 had a banner year. Had a over 200, actually over 250 units plus by the end of the year. 2023, we were good again, over 100 units plus by the end of the year. Not as good as 22, but looking to see what we can do here in 24. So every week we'll make picks for almost every NFL game, and then all the big college football games. And again, it's always based off of a unit. So far this year, our unit record is 17-10 for Bald Father Bets. Please come onto the channel, subscribe, like it. We'll play along. Love to hear from everyone. Love to hear from you, Sam. Love to hear from your audience. Love to hear where you guys think we're right, where you guys think we're wrong. It's really about that interaction that makes it all fun. And again, betting on football is supposed to be fun. So, please make sure you're doing things responsibly if you are doing it. And if you're riding with us, if you're winning with us, just give us a subscribe, give us a like, interact with the channel. That's all we ask. We'll always keep it free.
Awesome. Yeah, make sure to check out his channel, Bald Father Bets. Just type it, it's the first thing that comes up. Before we get out of here, gosh darn it, this is the cost that I pay. I can't bring up the super chat that happened earlier because it happened so far back in a very active chat, but what I can do is I can at least read it aloud. Thank you, Justin Ziegler, for the $20 super chat. He says, Sam, I disagree with the LSU take. They played a great game, and the SEC should watch out. USC, thanks to Lynn, just stepped up on defense, and Miller Moss was cool under pressure. Big Ten should be worried. Your thoughts on that?
The first part of it, that the SEC still needs to watch out for LSU. LSU is still a dangerous team in the SEC. Anyone who thinks they're just going to walk into Baton Rouge and get a win, or they're going to host LSU and they're going to get a win and there's not going to be a problem, I mean, they're crazy. So absolutely, LSU is still a dangerous team in the SEC. I think the drop off from Daniels to Nussmeier, like we talked about, is just so significant, and how much they relied on Daniels to win last year. But we'll see. We'll see what they're able to do. And I think that losing Denbrock to Notre Dame is a big deal as well. They're changing out the offensive staff. It's not the same system. They don't have the same playmakers. It's difficult. With regards to the USC pick, his take on USC, I mean, we'll see. I just said I think Miller Moss and Drew Aller are the top two quarterbacks in the Big Ten. And when you have one of the best quarterbacks in the conference, you can always get a win. That's the one equalizer at any position in college football is quarterback. They can win you a game even when you're not as good of a team. Um, Look at Patrick Mahomes beating the San Francisco 49ers last year in the Super Bowl. San Francisco was better at almost every single position except quarterback, and Patrick Mahomes won the game. So it can always happen. But do I see it? Do I see USC having? Am I putting USC in my Big Ten contenders? Do I think they're beating Ohio State in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship this year right now? No, I don't. So that's kind of where I'm at. But they had a great game, and no one's going to take USC lightly.
Yeah, I agree. After that performance against LSU and some of the other games in the Big Ten, I thought to myself, well, USC will have a better record for sure than I initially predicted, which is refreshing because I told people when I projected USC to go 5-7 preseason, I said, don't if you use my advice for betting or anything, don't take that because I felt very iffy, very gross about it, but I was just so high on so many teams that's how it laid out. But yeah, I agree with you a lot there. And make sure again to subscribe to Bald Father Bets, to click his notification bell. We're going to have him on, I'd say fairly often if we can, because my live shows, if you couldn't already tell, I'm going to be going live less than I originally planned on, just because I think it's better for the channel, better for you. I traditionally have gone a lot more in depth than other channels who go as live like that often, like 3-4 times a week. I'm gonna try and do 3 times a week, guys. But the Friday one will probably be only for Patreon and YouTube College Football with Sam members. So like you have to pay to access that. Monday will be like a reaction. Wednesday will be a prediction. So on and so forth. Things are subject to change though, but again, 8 p.m. This is starting next week. So we'll be live at least one more time this week. And then tonight, very late, I don't know how many of you are going to stay up, but especially if you're an Oregon fan, you are going to want to be on the Oregon channel for the Voice of College Football. I'm going to be on there at 10:15 p.m. Eastern time for like a half hour. It's 9:15 Central time. Just wanted to let everyone know that. Where to find me, because I'll be on there tonight. Again, 9:15 Central time, 10:15 Eastern time. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining us. We'll certainly have you on soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, make sure to stay on because I do want to talk to you after this is all done. Well, thank you guys so much for being on Touchdown Talk episode 18. I will see you guys very soon. Thank you for the super chat, for the support. I will be live for everyone on YouTube for Michigan, Texas. I'm going to have a sheet with all the depth charts, rosters. I'll be covering that shortly after the game's over. There will be a reaction to that game, just like instant reaction, instant analysis, or close to that. And then for members only, there will be a Colorado-Nebraska live stream that I will be doing as well. Thank you so much, and I will see you all very soon.